body. Dooby-dooby-doo.
All right. Happy Friday, guys. Welcome to Sabby Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you are new, I want to let you know that Sabby Sabs podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. And you can catch me here Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. My special guest tonight is Steve Grumbine. He's the founder of Real Progressives, and he's the host of Macro and Cheese podcast. And he's a co-host at Status Coup. Welcome, Steve. Welcome back.
Hey, thanks for having me back. It's been a while.
I know it is. It's been a moment. There are a couple people that came on a couple times last year, and I was like, I need to bring them back on. It's been a minute, but thanks so much for coming on. Now, Steve, I know we're getting into this discussion here about the Federal Reserve announcement about raising the interest rates. So I have a clip here I want to play really quickly, and this is the announcement that is coming from the chair of the Federal Reserve, and he's making this announcement here.
Today, the FOMC raised our policy interest rate by 75 basis points, and we continue to anticipate that ongoing increases will be appropriate. We are moving our policy stance purposefully to a level that will be sufficiently restrictive to return inflation to 2%. In addition, we're continuing the process of significantly reducing the size of our balance sheet. Restoring price stability will likely require maintaining a restrictive stance of policy for some time. Today, the FOMC raised our policy interest rate by 75.
Okay, so that is the announcement from the chair of the Federal Reserve. And there was also an announcement here from Joe Biden's press secretary about the interest rates hike as well.
The Fed is an independent agency, and we respect their independence. The Fed actions help bring inflation down. And as mortgage rates increase, demand in the housing market should continue to cool, and inventory should increase, which should have the effect of lowering housing inflation. This is part of our transition to stable and more stable and steady growth, as you hear us speak about from our economic team, and also from myself and from the president. And again, stable and steady growth with lower inflation. This is the kind of economy that delivers for working families, and that's how we see the work of the Fed. I'm not going to go into any specifics, any more details from here.
Okay, Steve. So for those who are not aware, like Steve is I would say an expert when it comes to modern monetary theory, MMT. Based on what you just heard there, they're basically saying that in order to decrease inflation, they will need to increase interest rates. So I just want to hear from you, because I still feel like we're still going to be paying more.
Yeah, I wouldn't. This is not about you paying more. Okay. See, interest rates are a direct transfer of wealth to the rich, to interest rates, bonds, all that stuff. This is a rich man's game, the stuff that the wealthy already own, people that already have money. Okay. So when they increase the interest rates, that's someone spending, our spending on getting loans with that interest rate hike going to someone else. And this is intentional. When we came out of the pandemic, we knew we had some supply chain issues that broke up, that jumped out at us, right? I mean, let's be fair. The whole world came to a stop for the most part for a little while. Naturally, it takes a little bit of time to get back up. But once they realized that people had received just enough sustenance during the pandemic that they might not be inclined to rush back to work and take any type of job they wanted to, they started realizing we've got a problem. We, being the capitalist class, has a problem. And so we, the capitalist class, decided, we're going to stop spending. So the federal government had to stop spending first. That was their first thing. Joe Biden's out there celebrating $2 trillion in deficit reduction. Deficit being the private sector deficit, our deficit, you're a my deficit, while as the government has a surplus in that phase. But the government neither has nor doesn't have money because it creates money. So when it receives that money back from us, it just deletes it. In the case of the spending cuts, that also is intentional. So just cutting spending alone creates this natural austerity moment. Okay. Add in the interest rate hikes, and now that intentionally increases not only the cost of credit, but it also simultaneously depresses the economy. So by cutting federal spending, and if you think about how does the federal government spend, it gets contracts with these big multinational corporations, it gets contracts with these massive military contractors for the military industrial complex, it does a host of things too. That's how that money gets spent into the economy. Well, they already raised the hell out of the military budget. They just kept on bumping it up, right? So that's already taken care of. Now we got to cut on the social side. So that's part of the austerity model that they're doing right here. The idea that this is to tame inflation is ridiculous. Let me explain to you why. If you're trying to tell me that demand is so exceeding supply and you're a business person and you want to make more money, what do? Do you sit there and cut the spending, cut it off, raise interest rates, or do you want to create more of your product, okay, and sell more of it to make even more money, right? It would tell you that this isn't about bringing down prices. This is something altogether different. It's about labor having too much power over itself for a moment, more power than the capitalist class wants you to have. So by raising interest rates, they wait to see any change it. Did you guys stop spending? Did you guys start getting sad and scared and worried about your job? No, not yet. Let's go ahead and raise it 75 more basis points. And then you say, oh, did it do it yet? They look around for a minute. Nope, the people's still happy. We got to raise it a little bit more. And they're going to keep doing this until they crash the economy. We have evidence of this from the 70s with the OPEC crisis. They did the same exact thing. So this is the playbook they know. But you got to ask yourself before I go any further, what is the purpose of this, right? What causes inflation? Unfortunately, the right wing, the real right wing, the real negative corporate elite that run not only the government, but really international relations and everything else through organizations like the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank and stuff, which is an arm of U.S. imperialism, of course. All of that plays together in this mix. So if you think about what their purpose is, we think our government, and it should, by the way, what should be and what is are two different things, right? We feel our government should be serving our needs. We don't understand why they're doing these things. Why in the world would they be raising rates and making it harder on us? Why do we have to take a haircut when there's record profits going on? Doesn't make sense, does it? Until you understand the austerity narrative, the real narrative that capitalism cannot survive without austerity. Austerity brings it up, and then once you get too much power, it drops it back down and does it again, and then drops it back down and does it again. And so when they give you your bread and circuses on the rise back up, that little teeny rise back up, everybody breathes a sigh of relief. Oh my God, I'm not going to get laid off. Oh my God, maybe I made it through this time. And so that's what this is all about. Trust me, that's what this is all about.
Wow. Well, one of the things I've noticed too, they're already calling for a recession, right? That we're heading into a recession. And Professor Wolff mentioned this, and I know you guys have different opinions about MMT, but Professor Wolff mentioned in reference to a recession, this happens every 4 to 7 years. So how can we, like as Americans, is there a way we can prepare for a recession, or is it kind of completely like out of our hands?
So recessions usually start with the federal government stopping spending. Once the federal government starts reducing its deficit, that brings on recessionary conditions. All right. What they tend to do is the goal here with this, they have this counter-cyclical spending is the way the Keynesian approach is. So what they do is they say when the economy is good, we'll go ahead and raise taxes because that's the time to raise taxes because we want to keep the economy from overheating. But then when the economy starts going down, they usually try to lower taxes, try to make it so that we have enough goods and services at a price that we can afford to keep the economy going. The reason that we have these boom bust cycles is because we fundamentally believe that, banks are the ones that are creating money, and banks are the ones that are doing all the work in the economy. Reality is the federal government controls the whole thing, the whole thing. And so what does the federal government serve? The federal government serves capital. So how do I think the problem with Richard Wolff's assessment is that it's kind of generic in that sense. There's real cause and effect. When the government ceases to spend, when it raises interest rates, when it absolutely cuts our ability to survive, that's when we start making different decisions ourselves. We stop spending. We stop going for ice cream. We stop going to a movie. We stop doing the little things that keep life good. Maybe we cut Netflix. So the idea here of how do we predict a recession? How do we survive a recession? How do we know about this? Modern monetary theory, which is something that I do care very much about. I'm much more than MMT, but MMT is very much a core part of the underpinning there. When you understand what they call sectoral balances, right? So you understand the federal government is one way that money enters into the economy. The other way that money enters into the economy is selling goods and services abroad, so that you get that through your balance of trade, so you can bring money back into the country that way. And then the last way is private debt. Well, private debt is how businesses win every time. It's how corporations win every time. And so when the federal government stops spending, and we as a net importing nation are not sending goods and services to make money into the country, the only thing we have left is private debt. Each of us has a certain cap for how much private debt we can take on. Once we hit that saturation point, then all of a sudden it really goes bust. And that's when you start seeing recessions, and more so depressions, until the federal government stimulates it again. What if the federal government, instead of doing this kind of crazy boom bust cycles, decided to institute a federal job guarantee? Federal job guarantee that when the economy goes down, instead of people being laid off, which is what their goal is, by the way, their stated goal, Larry Summers wants 8 to 10 million people laid off. He wants to have more and more people laid off to create the precarity that makes the working class have to take less in wages, because you won't accept less when you have a little bit of options. When you have no options, you'll take whatever you can. I remember reading stories during the great financial crisis where people were driving 2 and 3 states away to go work a midnight shift at Walmart. And you had your Mitt Romney celebrating it, of course. Oh, that's great Americanism, being resourceful. But that is baked into this plan that they're doing. So the idea of how do we survive? How do we see a recession? You got to be able to know where we are in that sectoral balances approach. Is the government spending? Well, we know that Joe Biden's busy telling everyone right here, right now, that we've reduced the deficit by $2 trillion. Okay. We already know that people were able to purge some of their private debt. Not all of us. Some of us didn't have any luck in that during the pandemic, myself included. But there were other people that were able to pay off private debt. And during that time period as well, student debt was put on hold, which should be eliminated, but that's another story. But they went ahead and allowed people to not make those payments during that time. So what's happening is they're clawing that back. They're clawing that back. So this is an artificial recession brought on by the capital class in a weird kind of universal truth. These guys all are protecting the elite. Every country is part of this. It's not like just the U.S., although the U.S. is definitely dominating this. So I wish I could tell you that, oh, it's the free market and this is the way it goes. And if you just read these things and check the stock market, everything will be okay. That's not true. They're artificially manufacturing this. This is what the Fed is doing. And in concert, Joe Biden and the Democrats, and really with the help of the Republicans, their boxing buddy, okay, they are literally doing this on purpose to bring us back to size, not the rich to size. You see record profits, stock buybacks, all these things that make them good. This is how they retrench themselves. So I think you need to be able to judge where we are spending wise. And when you see that spigot get cut off, you can pretty much assure yourself that the goal here is to suck up what savings you have and get you back into private debt. Hence the reason why my background is always debt, because that's the deal. That's what we're up against. That's our open air prison right there.
That makes sense. There's an article here. There's one piece in this USA Today article about the federal hikes for interest rate that I want to point out that I think is really important, because we just heard Biden's press secretary say that this is actually going to help the housing market. But in this article from USA Today, they're saying as the Fed continues to combat inflation, the housing market will continue to slow as one of the most interest rate sensitive industries. Homeowner equity levels are high because of the rapid appreciation, and mortgage default rates remain near all-time lows as market cools. But then they go on to say, we're unlikely to see mortgage rates move down until the second half of next year, but more likely not until 2024. So there's no quick remedy through this plan in reference to housing, but the way that she explained it in the clip we played earlier, she made it seem like this is going to free up the housing market. But the housing market has been a mess, at least where I'm on the East Coast. The housing market in the Northeast has been a mess for years.
So let's talk about that, right? If they're trying to force a recession, and they are trying to do this, they're desperately trying to do this. What does that mean? When I get laid off, when the audience gets laid off, and we have a house and we have a mortgage, and all of a sudden our mortgage goes to foreclosure, and all of a sudden it's sold at auction, they're going to be removing current owners from their housing, and the new owners, which might be BlackRock, it might be any number of corporate interests buying up those houses, it could be flippers, it could be any number of people, right? They will come in, they will do their magic, and then they will turn around and rent them back to us for an exorbitant fee. This is all part of that game, right? So how does it help the market? Well, it depends. Who is it that you're talking about? Are you talking about landowners? Are you talking about landholding companies? Are you talking about JP Morgan? Are you talking about, these horrible, fraudulent groups? Or are you talking about home buyers, people like you and I that might be wanting to buy a home? If you're talking about us, this is a terrible situation. Although we may be able to buy houses on the cheap after they've been taken away from their previous owner, refurbed, and then put back on the market, maybe. But the reality is the goal here is always to make it hard on us, to take away what we have, and then to repurpose it or resell it or rent it or whatever it is that they do within this mix. And this is all part of that cycle. And it's a very toxic cycle of capitalism. And it purges itself, and it purges us of our possessions, and it intends to keep us down. I interviewed a wonderful woman. I strongly recommend having her on your show. Her name is Clara Mattei. She wrote the book, Capital Order, How Economists Invented Austerity and Paved the Way to Fascism. I strongly recommend having her on. I had moments during my interview with her where I thought my head was going to explode, just because I was connecting dots that had only been islands before in my mind. I knew the facts, I knew the data, I knew the details, but it didn't have the analysis to tie them together in the way that I did today. And I just was like, wow, okay. And the way she tells it, and she can tell this much better than I can, but the way she tells it is during World War I, obviously some pretty big things happened, right? We had the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917. We had a lot of really important factors going on as that happened, as capital nearly shit its pants. It couldn't figure out what was going on. And so you had everyone from Churchill to, the financiers in the United States, Mussolini, all the other folks tied into this thing, anything to stop this labor-led revolution. And if you think about the black shirts in Italy and how they went around and terrorized the citizens, they did this as a part of their austerity package. Mussolini was a famous Austerian, okay? But even Churchill looked on at Mussolini with, like the eyes that you only wish your lover would look at you with. He thought, wow, this guy really gets it. wow, if I were in Italy, that's how I'd do it. However, Clara talks about how the UK was different. You're going to see something very interesting as it pertains to Democrats and Republicans here. So envision the UK and Churchill and that gang considering their world more so as the Democrats with the nice bedside manners. We're in it for the family. We're all here to do it. We're going to do the good thing for the right reasons, kind of thing, right? We're going to take a haircut. We're going to reduce spending. We're all going to consume less, and we're going to produce more because we're going to do it for the country, right? That's the UK version, right? The Mussolini version was more like the Republicans just freaking, we're not even going to pretend. We're just like, F you, man. If you ain't making it, you deserve to die. You didn't work hard enough, die. You don't have it, die, whatever. So they're naked in their hate for mankind, whereas these people hide it behind the things. And that's kind of the Churchill Mussolini dynamic, if you will. And so you think about how can you come to the same austerity point with fascism over here and this other sort of corporatist fascism, this dying empire fascism over here. The fact is that austerity is necessary across both of them. So I strongly recommend interviewing her. You will have the best interview of your life. She's fantastic.
I'll have to check her out. I know that when we talked about housing just a minute ago, I was just thinking about something when you mentioned renters. Because one of the problems, I think, like for those of us that are millennials and for the Gen Z generation as well, there's this idea or this misconception that we wanted to just be renters, right? We wanted to live in these small micro units. We didn't want a lot of space. And it's not so much that we didn't want that. It was just that's what we could afford like at the time, right? But I think that if people lose their homes, now this is taking me back to 2008 with Obama and the housing crisis again. And for those of us who were around during that time, we remember what that was like. If people lose their homes and they become renters again, then their net worth will also decrease. And this happened under Obama. And we were talking about this just a couple of days ago, that how Black wealth decreased under, or actually tanked under Barack Obama's presidency because of his economic policies and him bailing out Wall Street instead of the American people, the homeowners. So when you lose your house, like your net worth is going to decrease, and it's hard to get back there, right? Like it's one thing if you're there and you don't lose your home, but it's one thing if it takes you forever to get there, to get home ownership, and then you lose your home and you're a renter again. It's hard to get back in that place again. Is there anything that you think could be done or anything we could do to stop these companies like BlackRock and Vanguard from buying up these properties? Because they're doing the same thing in the city to some of these public housing units. City is allowing them to fall apart on purpose, right? And then they just tear the building down. The people are displaced. And then they build luxury buildings there. Is there anything that we can do to stop those companies from coming in and basically like taking our wealth?
Yeah. First things first, great setup for the question. I just talked to a gentleman named Davarian Baldwin. You may have heard of him. He's a great guy. He wrote this book called In the Shadow of the Ivory Tower. And he's a Black professor at Trinity College. He's up your way. I believe it's Connecticut. And he talks about how you end up having these things called universities, okay, that are nonprofits. They come in, they buy up all the land, and then they gentrify it. And then they have their own private police force that then serves to protect the campus, never mind the community that was there to begin with. And so you see this kind of thing happening all over the country. He particularly talks about Arizona State University. So this is a business model. This is the collection of private through the state, public-private partnerships right here, okay? And the idea is that they are kind of like a money funneler of sorts for all these capital ventures that come through the nonprofit. They don't have to pay tax because they're partner with the university. So they set up shop on the university. They pay no property tax at all to the community, that local community that was probably very, very impoverished to begin with. And so these people now, whenever they come up on the campus, they're, you're the bad guy, and they bring the cops out, all the rest of the nonsense that they go through with. So this is one model of what you're talking about there about stopping the BlackRocks and so forth. However, flipping around. If you go back to the 08, 09, we know the Patrick Lovell and some others that work with Bill Black went through great pains of exploring and understanding elite control fraud. They know this stuff happened. Bill Black busted the Keating Five back in the late 80s, 90s timeframe. Okay. He and the others have many great whistleblowers have shown how the elite control fraud, where these companies literally know that they're defrauding their buyers and sellers, sell them these properties, and they know full well that these people can't afford them, won't be able to do whatever it is that it takes to keep them up. And they know that they'll be foreclosed or whatever. But what they do is they go ahead and they sell it to them with the intention of them failing, knowing full well that they'll be able to ultimately they've already gotten paid. And Bill Black wrote the great book, The Best Way to Rob a Bank is to Own One. Strongly recommend reading that. Okay. So these guys know exactly what they're doing. Obama was complicit in this. Paulson was complicit in this. Every single one of those people in the Obama administration were complicit in this. This wasn't an accident. It had nothing to do with bailing out Wall Street. They do this as a point of reference to literally reify the capitalist class. And if anybody teases me for using the word reify, I deserve it. Anyway, they do. They literally bring that shit into existence. They like manifest that stuff. And we, on the other hand, are sitting there going, hey, who's looking out for us? And because we can't fathom that they're not working for us, we can't fathom that we didn't elect them, we can't fathom that we didn't have our say, we can't fathom, it's too much, our brains would explode, that when Obama comes up there looking snazzy with a Stetson, shooting threes and everything else and doing his groovy moves, everybody say, oh, he's so cute, he's adorable, oh my God, Michelle's wearing the most beautiful dress. And everybody feels a sense of love. And I get it, especially if you've never seen someone like yourself up on that stage as the head of the country. You can certainly understand why people would swoon over that, right? But once you peel back the veneer and you realize that just like Bill Clinton destroyed the welfare, of this nation, so did a Barack Obama. And, so did Bush too. Let's not in any way, shape or form take these suckers off the hook. I just don't expect nothing from Republicans, right? So I don't even talk about them. So, I mean, seriously, I just can't bring myself to get yeah, you're the enemy. You're a wolf. I agree. Okay. So these guys say they're my team, though. They keep saying they're my team. And then when they don't do it. So that's my grievance with the Democratic Party, if you will. But in fairness, what can we do about it? You got to believe we can do something about it before you can do something about it, right? So anything we could do to stop it would be a Band-Aid on capitalism, right? Oh, we'll just reform it. Well, what are they going to do? They'll find another way, just like they've done every day since they ended slavery. They went ahead with vagrancy laws. They went with all these things throughout history. They always change the words. They'll do something else just like that too. So I don't think there's anything short of people getting in the streets, knowing full well this is happening, becoming ungovernable, building mutual aid, enforcing this, because this is part of a larger capital plan. That's one area. It's one aspect of the system, and it's a very ugly one. But you got to believe that you have elected representatives that would help you. Do you feel like you have an elected representative that will help you? I don't.
No.
I don't. So the question becomes, if you know full well that they're not going to serve your needs, if you already know that, and you know that by their deeds, by their words, right? If you already know that, then you know that you've got to take an alternative route. And this is the part that most people are unwilling to look at. A general strike still keeps you in capitalism, still keeps you in this situation. We're still dealing with an existential climate crisis. We're still dealing with people without health care. We're still dealing with people committing suicide from horrible debt. So what good does it do to take to the streets to just try and get them to change one law? Okay, let's end, we'll make capitalism more, what was it, compassion or something like that, for 5 minutes. It's not that way, because we don't realize that interest rate hikes are an attack on our class. Our class unity is destroyed by interest rate hikes. They don't understand that yet. Most people don't have any class analysis. Most people have no scientific understanding of the situations that we're in. They don't have any understanding of history, not real history, and it's not their fault. So how do you fight it? Well, you got to have everybody understanding what the problem is first. We don't have that. Then if you understand at least the problem, then you've got to be willing to take steps to solve it. If you're not willing to address the problem, you can't take the steps to solve it. And the problem is that the steps to solve it, it's ugly, right? It's ugly. It's the big R word, right? And it doesn't have to be a violent one. It can be civil disobedience. It can be a political revolution, like Bernie said. It could be. It didn't happen, but it could be, right? But we have to be willing to not look at these politicians and not look at them as our saviors, as gods, but look to ourselves, look to each other, and find the common unity of class solidarity and fight back. And, you know, it's interesting. I talked to Ben Norton the other day, and looking at the way the crisis in Ukraine is going on right now with Russia and the NATO forces coming through and the EU doing what it does, most people have no understanding of the financial implications of all this stuff and the way they're using the IMF to get into Ukraine, the way they're using the IMF to use that austerity measure to create the conditions in Ukraine on its own. I mean, we could talk about the Azov battalion. We could talk about the Nazis. The reality is there's a lot of millions and millions of regular people there, kids, moms, dads, uncles, grandparents, whatever, that are getting killed. And it's not about Ukraine and Russia. It's about U.S. imperialism, realizing you have to go back to Joe Biden's first State of the Union to really understand. He went out there and he said point blank, China, we're in a competition with China. China's the scary guys, right? All the while, you know that we had already been working the Russia angle since Hillary lost, when they decided to try and cover their tracks to try and make it seem like, oh, Hillary would have never lost to Trump. Everyone loved Hillary. She's the most qualified. Of course it happened. So
actually, I would say Russia, they've been working that since the 80s.
Hell yes. I mean, it's been longer than that. It's been going back. I mean, you can go back to the Bolshevik Revolution if you want to be honest. Literally trace that shit all the way from 1917 on. And I'm telling you right now, the world has not been the same since. And yes, exactly. We do everything we can to stop socialism from coming into the world. We do everything from the World Bank, the IMF, all that stuff, the World Trade Organization. All of those entities are there to coax other countries into a capitalist framework to avoid being part of that other framework. And you could see the balkanization that's going on with China, Russia, Iran, Africa, and the global south. They are realizing that I don't need to be tied to your SWIFT system. I don't need to be tied to your monetary system. We have the real resources in our ground. We have the real resources in our rivers. We have good connectivity because China had enough sense to build the Belt and Road Initiative, to rebuild the Silk Road, to do all the stuff that made China great. And that's why China is now in the crosshairs, because China is showing our ass because we did not invest in our own infrastructure when we could have. We let austerity reign supreme. And now we're looking at them and we're like, son of a bitch. And so we have to stop them by any means necessary. And that's what they're doing. I say we, being the powers that be, not me. I'm completely on the non-capital side here. I'm on the side of people. I'm on the side of labor. I'm on the side of planet. So that's what I think you see there. And hopefully I wasn't too long-winded, but that's the story.
No, that was awesome. And I highly recommend those of you, if you haven't seen that documentary, please watch it. It's really good. There's a lot of information there. So take it episode by episode, just saying. But I think there's a question for you on Rockfin, Steve, about financials. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Dave. Question for Steve. With all these asset bubbles, housing, etc., now going to deflate or pop, do you think there is any hope in the coming depression for people to fight back against the banks and then remove a lot of the worst capitalists there if possible? Or do you think there is no hope, and what should we do? I understand mortgage markets pretty well from past housing organizing.
Ooh, that's a lot to unpack. Is there hope? Hope is something that we have to find ourselves, right? We have to find that through class solidarity, through class struggle, and being able to unite under that that understanding of our class interests. And I know that sounds kind of quaint, and I know there's a lot of people out there that would say I'm being a class reductionist here, but I assure you I am an intersectional guy through and through. Okay. So, but we have to get there, and we're not there. We're nowhere near that. That's the problem, right? The problem is that we have so much misinformation out there that out of reactionary fear, we glom onto conspiracies and other things that may prove to be true later on, but we stop seeking, we stop learning, we stop having mature conversations to get that root understanding, and we become reactionaries ourselves in panic and desperation. And so a lot of what you see right now is a cross section of people that think they can vote their way to a better future, people that know revolution is necessary, and then the other people that are making revolution necessary, being the capitalist class. And so within that space, I'm not sure that we have the kind of class solidarity right now to be able to do the kind of thing we would need to do to stop them from what they're doing right now. I assure you that, unfortunately, it may feel good to talk about like the Rothschilds or the this and the that, but it's bunk. In the end, it's really a matter of capital versus labor. It's always been that way, capital versus the working class. And the people that are capitalists will always do what they have to do to retain their position and to keep that flowing. And that's how the people that get in power anyway. I know for a fact I have never voted for, I don't think I've ever been on the right side of an election ever in my life. And so I think to myself, well, that's not true. Back in the day, I used to be, because I was a scumbag Republican. But the reality is that when you think about what it would take for us to overcome this, I've often been teased and tormented by people that think I'm being pie in the sky with this stuff, but I mean this 100%. We are up against places like the Pete Peterson Foundation. Billionaires fund this thing. These guys have the best computers. They have the best everything. They have the best analysts. They have data. They have all kinds of information that we don't have access to. And they are able to work with precision because they're working. This is their job. They're working and getting paid to stop us from organizing, to get us to stop trying to make anything of ourselves. And the minute they see us make any progress, there'll be some sort of a calamity. There'll be some sort of a thing that requires us to go, oh, what was that?
Yep.
We lose focus. This is why I say we've got to stop focusing on electoralism. Vote. I'm not saying don't vote. I mean, I don't know enough. I'm not smart enough to say don't vote. That's just a bridge too far for me to say. I expect that I'm voting. When I vote, my vote is to determine what kind of a beatdown I want to get. Do I want to get a full-throated beatdown by the Republican side, or do I want to get a stealth beatdown by the Democrats? And you think about the identity politics and the social justice warrior stuff. I mean, there's real stuff there, right? I mean, Sabby, I was in talking with DeVary Baldwin. He explained that the term woke started back in like the 50s and stuff like that. This was an understanding of, hey man, I'm on the tip. I know what's going on. I know what's up. And woke has suddenly been bastardized like Kente cloth with Pelosi, just like the word progressive got snatched away by these fools, right?
Yep.
When you think about that, we keep giving up ground. It was like, oh, they got it. Okay, let's keep moving. And we keep boxing ourselves in as we move away instead of fighting right there. No, stop, fight. Don't let them take that. No, fight. Don't let them take that. I mean, like, words mean something. These identities mean something, and they keep taking them. And now it's like, how much of an asshole can you be to trans people or to gay people or to women or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, there's black people. Hey, let's go ahead and make them suffer a little bit more, right? This is open season, if you will, right now. They've literally taken the mask off. And so how do we get to this gentleman's, I think it was Pappy's question of how do we fight back? We've got to be able to accept that we're all different. We got to accept that we all have a class interest. Though you may have a different struggle than I have, we all have struggle here. And that struggle is what has to unite us, even if it's slightly different for each of us. The fact is that we are being crushed by capital. And I know this may seem kind of quaint and stuff, and I don't like the hand wavy, it's the system, because there's a lot of systems within the system that you've got to address. Okay. And they do that on purpose. In fact, back to my book that I'm talking about with Clara here. She talks about the trinity of austerity, and she breaks it down and says that it's fiscal austerity, it's monetary austerity, which we see with the interest rates. We see the fiscal with the deficit reduction. We see the interest rates. And then the third is industrial austerity, where they make our jobs precarious. What is the purpose of raising interest rates? To lay off millions of people. Okay. So you're asking the question, what can we do? And the question becomes, no, what will we do? Because when millions of people are laid off again, to bring down inflation, I want to talk about the inflation here in just a second too. But when you want to take down this inflation, okay, what are you going to do about it? Well, you're going to be laid off. So what are you going to do when you're laid off? Are you going to organize with people? Are you going to fight back then? Are you going to just do something radical and not thought through and then cause all kinds of problems like what the folks did with January 6th? They didn't think it through. I mean, I'm not here to defend their type, but I'm here to defend their right in that sense. And the fact is that if you and I, let's say you and I talked to this guy, Pappy, and we organized all of our friends to fight back, and we show up at Congress, we block traffic in front of the Federal Reserve, we go to New York City and block Wall Street back like they did in Occupy Wall Street. What if we do all those things, right? Well, now, because of the idiots of January 6th, they've got their antenna up. They're looking for people to act like this. So they're going to start passing laws and regulations that make it even more hard to do these things. Okay. Stupid idiots running off for an idiotic thing when simultaneously the real class struggle requires class solidarity for a revolution of sorts. So I say we have to build parallel institutions. And that's the thing people laugh at me for. They're like, what do you mean? I'm saying, well, you got the Pete Peterson Foundation there funneling them. We don't have a think tank of our own. We don't have our own understanding of things. We don't have that. We're all been dumbed down and propagandized to the point where we're like those people in Wall-E just sitting there fat and sloppy in the spaceship. You know, we've lost our ability to do a lot of things because they've dumbed us down. We've got to teach each other. And that's why I go with the each one, teach one. We've got to teach each other. We've got to radicalize each other. And we've got to accept that the terms of our enslavement in this system have nothing to do with our desire. They've made this for us. We don't have a choice at this point other than to fight back or just take it. And unfortunately, too many will just take it and accept it. And that means that the hardy few that are willing to fight back will always be edgelords, as they say, or fringe or whatever, because they're the few that have the ability to see through the fog and say, there's true north. That's where I'm going. And so as a result of that, we don't have the numbers right now. We don't have the mutual aid set up. We don't have the think tanks. We don't have the communication networks set up. I think I talked about this last time, but Lenin in his book, What Is to Be Done, right? This is such a big deal to me. I will always hold on to this one. Talks about how important it is that there is like a discipline in media to have the true socialist voice talking about the labor and talking from a labor perspective. And that unfortunately, because there were so many of these pop-up outlets in those times, they didn't have the maturity and the knowledge and the understanding to uphold the socialist ideal. And as a result, you end up with these Soc Dems, you all of a sudden end up with Kerensky, and you end up with all these folks that are sympathetic to capital. And all of a sudden, class solidarity is destroyed. So what do? We got to get solid. We got to get solid. That's the best I can say, which requires education. And education ain't sexy, unfortunately, right? I mean, I wish I was good enough to be on TikTok to make them rock. I'm just not. I'm not pretty. I might be funny, but I don't think I'm funny looking probably. But I don't have the ability to do that kind of 30-second soundbite without it sounding like I'm a raving lunatic. So, how do you fix these educational things in a way that people take the time to read these books, right? I mean, literally, this is knowledge. This is where you understand the way the enemy is operating. And I said this before, when people say stuff about the Federal Reserve that is not true, and they're sure it's true, but it ain't true, but they're sure it's true, and they go running around saying this stuff, you can be assured the people up top are going, whew, thank God those idiots are running the show. Because they know that if we ever really truly understood that these things are like literally their technique to keep us down, They don't need,
Yep.
what do they need money for? For real, what do they need money? They don't need money. They have things that are far more valuable than money. They've got real resources. They've got access to real production. They've got access to things, private property that we don't have. So money is irrelevant to them. Their ability to achieve what they want to achieve doesn't contain the normal economic functions that are pertaining to us. They're above that system. They're out of that system. And so, that old meme of where everybody's sitting on the ground while the pigs are playing Monopoly on the table, and they're like, hey, if you just stand up, the game's over, right? That's the deal. But we're not there yet. We aren't there yet. And that's the problem. You can't force a revolution. Even Lenin knew you cannot force a revolution. You've got a revolution has to come as a result of the material conditions and the people understanding the material conditions, and then it will happen.
Right.
But
right.
as you can see, most are not thinking that way. Most are not prepared for that. Most are like, hey, AOC seems to be coming our way now. Hey, Ro Khanna seems to be coming our way now.
Yep.
Hey, maybe Nina Turner's coming our way now. Hey, maybe Marianne Williamson's coming our way now. And it feels good because they're like better. They're better than the others. But the reality is that they're not talking about bringing that down. They're not talking about ending that. So they're a bit of a placebo, right? They're a bit of placebo. I mean, they're better. Life is better, right? But it's not fixing the problem. It's beyond electoral solutions. So that's my take.
Right. No, well said. And I think something too that people tend to leave out a lot of times, and the mainstream media, I think, does this on purpose. They refer to them as they're socialists, they're communists. Da, da, da. And I would say to people, if you actually look through the DSA handbook, if you look over what they're about, never once have I heard Bernie Sanders or AOC or Nina Turner or Marianne Williamson say that they're for the workers having means or owning the means of the production. I've never heard them say that, not even Bernie Sanders. So basically, it's like the way I explain it to people is that they want more social programs, but I've never heard them say they want the workers to control the means of production. So I think that's the big difference there. And in reference to people organizing, I think one thing that we should also keep in mind is, what are we asking for? We need to have a set of demands. Like, what exactly do we want, right? Because when there was the George Floyd protest, what were they saying? They said defund the police, right? That was the demand. It didn't go over well with some people. Some people were confused by the slogan, but that's a whole nother story. But you have to have some type of demands. The civil rights movement, what were the demands? The women's movement, what were the demands? So they were asking for tangible things. And I feel like a lot of people will say to me, yeah, let's go. Let's hit the streets. Great. What are we asking for?
Exactly. Yes.
Just let me know. I know what I want. But do we all want the same thing?
Nope. I don't think we do. And I think that's part of the problem, right? As I have some friends that are probably at some level very left, very, very like left being in the spectrum, right? I'm not worried about parties here. I'm talking about like that spectrum of socialist, communist, anarcho, whatever. I'm looking at that spectrum, and they're probably pretty far to the left, way beyond Democratic Party, which is not left at all, right? But they are fundamentally sitting there thinking about their daughter losing the right to an abortion. And they're sitting there fundamentally thinking about all these little things that are, maybe the Democrats dangle those, right? Like, hey, I'm going to eliminate college debt. Sure you are, right? You're going to go 10,000 or whatever, when you could have done the full Monty. Why wouldn't you just get rid of it all, Mr. Biden? Right. But unfortunately, people are like, you know what? Less evil is less evil. That's the answer that comes back. I mean, Noam Chomsky even said, Medea Benjamin of Code Pink even said it. There's a lot of folks that say this stuff. Even Ralph Nader is now saying it, which is,
I saw.
Wow. Right. So, I mean, if Ralph is there, I tend to give Ralph a little bit more leeway because he's done so much for the movement. And so you ask yourself, what is he seeing that I'm not seeing? Right. And I really do believe in my heart of hearts that the way that ratchet effect works, okay, it just keeps shifting further and further and further to the right, to the point where it really is horrible, evil, black shirt style fascism, as opposed to this kind of, id pol version of fascism, corporatist state that the Democrats are putting out there. So it really comes down to the way the social order works. One is white supremacy and domination, and the other is white supremacy with a few social programs mixed in. So either one of them, you kind of get a full measure of white supremacy.
Yep.
And the grossness of them trotting out their tokens to kind of say, see, even Herschel thinks it's okay, or see, even so and so. And it's like, wow, are we that veneer level in our understanding? And you know what? We have to be gentle. And I'm not gentle. I'm freaking maniacally angry about this stuff. And it's because I read constantly and I want change now, right? But people have literally been dumbed down to the point where and the austerity message, which makes them scared for their lives, scared for their homes, scared for their families, makes it so all these higher level thoughts are a privilege of sorts to be able to experience or to consider, because survival, being a feral animal, in the streets, if you will, of society based on this capitalist order where you could be doing really good 1 minute, and then for whatever reason, the company lays you off. You're one business decision away from losing everything. And now all of a sudden you're down, and they throw you a couple pennies for a few weeks, and then they call you a freeloader. And then they say, get your ass back to work. And they know full well that there's not going to be the kind of job that you just lost. And so you go from having a career level job where you're able to take care of your family to suddenly working 3 jobs to try and make up for it. And you still have that student debt that Joe Biden made sure you got to keep. So I don't know what the answer is here, other than to say that we have to just get a kind of a base level understanding that capitalism is here to squash all of us. And if we can get to that point, I think some other things may come. We may not agree on everything, but if we can have that understanding that it's punching up, not punching down, if we can get that directional angle. And it's hard too, because you want to wake your neighbors up. You want to wake your friends up. You want to wake the other alt media people up. You want to influence the influencers. You want to make a change by any means necessary. So you might do some bullshit out there to try to get someone that you otherwise wouldn't necessarily talk to hear this message, to get them talking about it, even if it means you got to be their enemy for a minute. You want to make, what is that? Rage Against the Machine, shake them up, wake them up, to break the structure up or whatever. I mean, you'll do whatever it takes to get that moment, that alarm clock moment. And so, and I'll tell you straight up, that is absolutely something I do, because the stuff I talk about isn't sexy. It can be like watching paint dry. And so you got to find a way to make this super important shit matter. And like I said, I don't have the skill for TikTok, so I got to do it some way. Right. So, and I'm old, man. What can I say? I'm old. So
I will say, I'll say, in reference to mutual aid, we really do need more people to get involved. And I mean, those of us at RBN, like, we do mutual aid. We're all starting individual mutual aid chapters in our areas. So people in our areas can help us with those. But we really do, Rome's only one person, and he travels across the country doing that. But I can help, like, in my area. CJ can help in his area. Nick can help in his area. But again, we're only 5 people. So like we really do need like other people to help as well. And there's other organizations, I think, like Cooperation Jackson, which is also a workers co-op. They're doing a lot of mutual aid and helping people. They're based down in Mississippi. There's other organizations. And I think those groups just need more. They need more attention. They really do. They need more of a platform so people can know. Like, I tell people, and I've showed this map on here before, a lot of people don't even know there's mutual aid organizations in their area, but they have no idea. It's just not advertised. So they don't even know about it. But I think that, yeah, we definitely could use some help with that. And I think,
tell me more about it, because seriously, I don't have the ability. I'm like Professor Xavier now, right, from X-Men. I'm behind the scenes, behind my monitor, because my body won't allow me to do the stuff I used to do. So I'm in a different place in my activism life at this point. Our organization, though, I would love to help out in whatever way. I would love to help out. This is part of what I believe building parallel institutions is all about. Mutual aid is part of that. It's part of that. I think there's a lot of other things that have to go into that. But it is you cannot have a targeted strike, much less a general strike without mutual aid. So
Right.
all the talk of, I hate the Dems. Oh, that's great. What are you doing about it? Nothing. I mean, you can not vote for them, but that and a bag of chips gives you a bag of chips and a Republican. So what is it that you're looking for? What do you really want from this, right? So to me, mutual aid is a very important step here, and I'd be happy to find a way to help. I don't know what that looks like, but I would love to talk.
Yeah, I'll DM you. Like, we could definitely use some help, like also like with people on the back end, marketing, like flyers, like things like that. Just most of the time, like I'll be honest with you, I'm not the best. I can't draw. And I'm just not good with graphic art. I'm just not good with graphic art. So like that's not really like my thing. But there are things that people have different strengths, right? So there's certain things that they're good at that I'm sure we could use a lot of the help with. And that's just a big part of it. And I think in the beginning, like with RBN, that's something that we wanted to do. We wanted to we're trying to connect with other people and say, hey, we're doing mutual aid. Maybe we can, kind of do these things together. But it's difficult in this space because there's a lot of ego, Steve. There's a lot of ego. And,
Yep.
and some of us are not, sometimes we're not the nicest in terms of responding to people like
Sure.
like when there is ego. But I think, like that's the thing for us is like we really want people to get out there and fight. And in reference to electoral politics, I actually encourage people to focus on local politics more because that's where they're going to see the most change. I don't know what state you live in, but I'm in a ballot initiative state. So a lot of these progressive policies that Bernie Sanders ran on, we've already passed in Massachusetts. And it makes me like, sometimes it makes me want to scream because I'm like, I'm still seeing people, fighting for this or telling people, the politicians, to fight for this on the national level. And I'm like, you guys, a lot of you live in BI states. Why are you not getting these issues on the ballot and passing it in your state?
Yeah, well, I can tell you in Pennsylvania, we don't have that. And the Democrats in Pennsylvania fought tooth and nail to keep the Greens off the ballot the last time around too. And I can tell you what you're saying rings very true. If you've ever been to any of the local community school board meetings and things like that, I mean, the people that are not fighting for a socialist, new world, they're not fighting for the things we would consider to be, I would consider to be, I don't want to speak for you, to be valid. They know they're going for local judgeships. They're going for the dog catcher. They're going for anything local, and they're taking up the school board. And I was blown away with some of the emails that we would get from our school board, and some of the politics that are happening here in Pennsylvania that are local. Even it's really, really ugly. I mean, we're not talking about ideological fights. We're talking about like I hate my neighbor kind of fights, like in their political ads. Doug Mastriano, for example, holy cowabunga, you wouldn't believe some of the stuff out here. I literally picked up the phone one day and I said, I don't even give a shit about politics at all, like electoral anyway. But this guy literally has my skin crawling, the things he's saying, right? And you look, it's like, where's your sanctity coming from? Is it the Democrats? I certainly don't think so. Is it coming, so it's hard, right? I mean, especially at the local level, because these people are local people that really don't necessarily have deep understanding of class struggle and things like that. And so you wonder, okay, I did this, but what are they operating from? What paradigm are they operating from? And how can they make a difference? And how can they change the situation? And I really think that having local kind of home groups where people are teaching each other and learning will help educate people so that maybe they will run for local office. And you have informed people with leftist perspectives that understand organizing for the people and really start thinking about how they can invigorate their communities using those techniques. I mean, it's so weird when you think about it. Like the Democrats really did some really shady stuff to be able to lose labor, because labor was their bread and butter. So if you think about that, how the hell did they F that up that badly, right? I mean, in other words, they didn't F it up badly. This was a long process going back really forever. But let's really look at Reagan. You had Reagan Democrats. Many, many, many Democrats voted for Ronald Reagan. Okay. The Dixiecrats, the boll weevils, that whole gang. That Reagan Revolution was not a Republican thing. It was a capital class clapping back, the investor grades clapping back at labor as they dismantled union protections, as they dismantled the social safety nets and created more austerity conditions. So it's only gotten worse. And so when you bring somebody into a local office, what do they know? What are they going to do? Do they have to work a full-time job during the day and then sometime in the middle of the night between dinner and bath time for the kids, suddenly go to a meeting for a town hall? I mean, it gets tough because you end up finding people that have money that do it. And so people have money ain't got our class interest. So you're kind of in this catch-22 too. Anyway, that's my spiel.
No, it's true. But Steve, before you go, can you tell us one more time the name of that book and where can people find you?
So the book that I'm humping today is The Capital Order: How Economists Invented Austerity and Paved the Way to Fascism by Clara E. Mattei. Definitely worth getting. And you can obviously find me at realprogressives.org. That's our website. I do a show on YouTube called The Rogue Scholar. It's at Real Progress in Action YouTube channel. Please come subscribe. And I also do a podcast called Macro, the letter N, Cheese. You can find that on Spotify, iTunes, SoundCloud, whatever. And then, of course, you see me over at Status Quo on Tuesdays, being the lefty color commentary for Jordan on Tuesday nights. And then I do my own show called Let's Get Ready to Grumble that shows up on Sunday afternoons.
Awesome. Thanks so much for coming on, Steve.
It's my pleasure. Let's not let it be too far off in the future, man. I'll have you on soon. Okay.
All righty.
All right. Take care, everybody. Thanks for having me.
All right, guys. Lots to take in there, right? Like Steve is full of information. Like I hope you guys learned something there. I do want to go ahead and make sure I grab these comments here and shout out patrons, and we'll get into the other news stories. Thank you so much for the super sticker, JM, and thank you for this one as well. Tom, Steve does an awesome job explaining MMT. Check out Real Progressives. That's right. VA from New York. The book Steve recommended earlier, The Capital Order: How Economists Invented Austerity and Paved the Way to Fascism by Clara Mattei. Thank you so much for that, VA from New York. Guys, check out that book. Thank you for this super chat, Zach, the Celtics guy. According to Joy Reid, Netanyahu heads a far-right anti-fascist government or anti-racist government. Yeah, I know we talked about that last night. Sabby's reaction to that ridiculousness last night had me dying of laughter. Yeah, it was funny. That was a funny moment there. Delthea, liberals have surrendered existing institutions to the right. Therefore, we must now build new institutions. Agreed. Amy, what is the name of that? Yeah, we just did the book. Thank you for this super chat. Newbie, that dude quoted Rage Against the Machine. That's right. Rage Against the Machine is based, man. Thank you for this super chat, AJF. Anna needs to wise up and accept that she is in a compromised company boss against progressivism, let alone leftism. Follow that BJG route and she'll be supported too. We're going to get into that tonight because that was an interesting conversation between Professor Wolff and Anna Kasparian. Interesting conversation. Let me go ahead and shout out patrons. I didn't forget about you guys. Thank you guys so much. All of you that are Sabby patrons. If you're interested in being a patron, I have 5 categories: members, Sabbies, Sabsters, Sabinators, and of course, the ultimate. All of their names are listed here. You can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen on the ticker there. That's what that little ticker is for. Thank you guys so much. Really do appreciate your support. So, is this screen going to close? Okay, it did close. What are we talking about tonight, ladies and gentlemen? Again, great explanation there by Steve. I know when I found out about that story about the Federal Reserve deciding to increase interest rates, I was like, I have to contact Steve and see if he wants to come on to talk about this. All right. So tonight we are discussing Richard Wolff and Anna Kasparian's Democrat issue. Interesting discussion. I want to get your take on that. We're also going to get into Tucker Carlson and Lee give an alarming warning. And you guys, I told you, we've been talking about censorship often. There's more to be discussed. This is in reference to Twitter, Meta, and Homeland Security. So that is important to discuss. We just talked about the interest rate hikes from the Federal Reserve with Steve Grumbine. And we are also going to discuss question number 5 for Massachusetts. That is going to be on the ballot next week. Very important question, this one. Not that the other ones were not important, but this is a biggie. This is a biggie. Okay, I'll take the comments on Rockfin, Eric. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger Meadows. I keep saying we need a network of public banks at municipal and state level to build surpluses and insulate economies from national downturns in the economy. Outlawing private equity from owning housing, hospitals, medical facilities, clinics, dialysis centers, and nursing homes. We got to push these things in the states, be it through a ballot initiative, general strike, labor, etc. Yeah. See, that's another example where that's something that we really need to do through the states. Well said. Well said. Question number 5. Now, this one is a little bit different, right? So we covered question 1 through 4 already this week. This question, however, unfortunately, does not apply to every district in Massachusetts. I kid you not. I didn't make this up, but let's go ahead and get into it. That being said, this is a very, very important initiative because this ballot measure is about Medicare for all. I kid you not. Here we go. I don't know if many people are talking about this. They may not even know about it, but this is huge. Question number 5. Medicare for all added to 20 House districts. So let's go ahead and get into that. In the general election this year, some voters will see more than just 4 ballots on their question. 4 ballot questions, excuse me. Voters in 20 House districts across the state will be able to vote on whether they will or will not support Medicare for all. See, this is another example. Steve and I were just talking. What did I just say? These progressive policies that Bernie Sanders ran on, we have passed them faster through the state level, at least here in Massachusetts. They haven't passed at all on the federal level. The non-binding question is the broadest in the state and will affect parts of Western Massachusetts. So like I told you, this doesn't affect every district. I'll get into that reason in a second. Voters in the 2nd Berkshire, 6th, 7th, 8th, and 12th Hampton, and 2nd Franklin will see this on their ballot as question number 5. So here's the deal. If you don't live in these areas, you will not see that question on your ballot. Just wanted to make that very clear. The question asks voters if they support single-payer universal health care that provides the freedom to choose their own health care providers and eliminates the role of health insurance companies by creating an insurance trust fund that is publicly administered. One reason non-binding questions make the ballot is to pressure legislatures in districts where the question is asked to support the corresponding legislation on Beacon Hill. This one being an act establishing Medicare for all in Massachusetts. The voter's opinion has value, and certainly in terms of the broader campaign. It is going to be used by those who are advocating for it to be able to say to that legislature, look, a majority of your constituents voted to support this. So it certainly has value, but I think Is it guaranteed that the legislator is going to vote that way? No. And this is the catch. It's not necessarily guaranteed that they're going to vote that way. Mass Care, and I'm going to get into their site. The Massachusetts Campaign for Single Payer Health Care is behind the ballot initiative, and they had to collect 200 signatures in each House district to get the question on the ballot. This part is important as well. The question will also appear in parts of central and eastern Massachusetts, as well as the North and South Shore. The 7th and 8th Hampton County will also be electing a new state representative. So I just want to show you what that looked like from Mass Care. So Mass Care is the organization that put this all together. I found out about them recently. I wish I knew that this was happening last year so I could have gotten involved and helped collect signatures as well. But I will also add, Mass Care will be here. They will be coming on not next week, but the following week. I tried to get them to come on before, but it's crazy hectic for them right now, if you can imagine, with the midterms. But they will be here to discuss this. Now, on Mass Care's website, vote yes on question 5. Mass Care and Act on Mass is on the ballot in 20 districts. So they even had a sign here where you can sign up to Canvas, you can sign up to Phone Bank. And I want to show you the areas where that it includes. I think it's easier for you to see it this way than the way that it was in that article. So for Western Mass, this is important so you can see who the representatives are. So we have the Berkshires, Belchertown. Don't laugh. Yes, there actually is a Belchertown here. Belchertown, Ludlow, Pelham, right? So that's 7th Hampton, Chicopee and Springfield, 6th Hampton, 8th and 12th Hampton, Greenfield, Athol, I don't know. I've never heard of that town. Orange, okay, that's 2nd Franklin. If we go down central Massachusetts, we're looking at Acton, Carlisle, Chelmsford, Concord. Concord will probably vote no. See, you know what? I can already pick out the ones that I think are going to vote no, because most of the wealthy towns are probably going to vote against. Concord and Acton are probably going to vote against it. I could be wrong, but we'll see. Berlin, Boylston, Clinton, Lancaster, Sterling, Northborough, Framingham, Marlborough. And then for Eastern Massachusetts, Arlington and Cambridge, that should be interesting because it's a lot of college students in Cambridge that don't actually live here as a resident per se. Boston, Dorchester, Mattapan, Jamaica Plain, and Milton. So these are the districts. Again, keep in mind, like when I say Boston, that doesn't mean all of Boston. It's just the districts that are listed here. So that's important for people to see. Malden, Medford, and Somerville. Again, these districts here, if you note your representatives. And on the North Shore, Newburyport, that's the only one, see, for the North Shore. And then for the South Shore, we're looking at Holbrook, Quincy, Weymouth, Hingham, Hull, and Cohasset. So those are the areas. Eric, if you can put the link to this page in the chat, just in case people want to look at this again on their own. But we'll see how this works out in Massachusetts. Like I said, like this is they're kind of testing the waters here to see how many people in these districts are going to vote that way, and if the representatives are going to go ahead and vote yes, basically. But what is a non-binding ballot initiative? A non-binding public policy question is a question presented to voters in a specific state, Senate, or representative district. That's the difference. That's why it doesn't apply to the entire state. Hopefully, this passes the way that I hope that it will. I hope the majority vote in that way. So then it can put pressure on other counties here to say, you know what? We need to implement this as well. If this happens, then technically Massachusetts will be the first state in the United States to have Medicare for all. If it happens, we'll see. We shall see, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the super chat, newbie. Are the fired Twittered employees going to learn how to coal mine? Oh my God. I've seen a lot of those tweets and I'm just like, I don't know what you want me to do. Like it's, oh boy. Ashura, thank you for the super chat. Tiffany Cross got fired by MSDNC. I heard. That's the thing about working for corporate media. They can change at any time. They can put anyone in your spot at any time. Like it's just, whether you're going a good job or not. Kill your Igorgis. We did this in California. Looked good for a while, but didn't pass. You know, Mama Pelosi and the future 2024 President Gavin Newsom, well, it didn't pass. I remember that. But in California, correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't it that they wouldn't bring it to the floor for a vote, even though they had the votes? I thought that's what happened in California, but I could be wrong. Thanks for the super chat, Blue Moon Red Wine. Lucy's here. Write me in for AOC's district, New York 14. Lucine Canet. Lucy, I don't know if I pronounced your first name correctly. I just know it as Lucy. But so Lucy is a write-in candidate for AOC's district. So she said write her name in. So there you guys go. And I'm proud of you, Lucy. I am very proud. It's not easy to do. It's not easy to do. All right, guys, go ahead and hit that like button. I'm going to do a CJ thing here and I'm going to do a like check. This is not my thing. I don't even know if this is right though, because I already had this open. Oh, well, Eric, don't let me forget about the poll at the end, because I think I forgot to write that down at the bottom to remind myself. I can always still write it there though. All right, let's go into our next story here. So Tucker Carlson interviewed Lee Fang. So Lee Fang is a journalist. He writes for The Intercept. And you have to hear this story because, you guys, I told you about the censorship, that it's not just going to be them coming after certain journalists, that they're also going to censor people more heavily on social media. But we also discussed that interview with Joe Rogan and Mark Zuckerberg, where Mark Zuckerberg openly admitted that the FBI came to him in reference to political information on Facebook. So he had to self-censor Facebook, right? Or suppress content, certain content on Facebook, which he openly admitted on Joe Rogan's show. After that clip, I said, don't be surprised if this goes further than that, what happened with Facebook or Meta, whatever we're calling it now, if this goes even further. Well, now we know for sure that it will. Now, shout out to Case Study QB for this clip. Full segment and interview on Lee Fang's The Intercept story on Twitter, and Biden colluding to censor users. I can't make this up, but here we go.
Earlier this year, the Department of Homeland Security established its own ministry.
Oh, can we do a volume booster real quick? Thanks.
Of truth. It was so ridiculous it had to be disbanded almost immediately. The woman running it was so far out, she was a parody and discredited the censorship movement. Earlier this year, the Department of Homeland Security established its own ministry of truth. It was so ridiculous it had to be disbanded almost immediately. The woman running it was so far out, she was a parody and discredited the censorship movement. But that doesn't mean DHS has stopped trying to censor you. Oh, they are. You just didn't know about it. Thanks to The Intercept, which just obtained many years of internal documents from DHS, we know that companies like Facebook and Twitter have been working closely with the Biden administration to, quote, curb speech that the administration doesn't approve of. Emails also show that Twitter's top censor, Vijay Gotti, which was fired by Elon Musk, met every month with the Biden administration censors at DHS to talk about new ways to get you to shut up in unconstitutional fashion.
Okay, so working with the Biden administration to censor people on Twitter. And this may be why, for those of you who are on Twitter, this may be why like some of your tweets don't get as many likes or as many views, depending on what you said. Certain topics and certain words may be automatically suppressed. But the scary part about this is they're working with the Biden administration, which means that anything that is negative about Joe Biden or Hunter Biden, the laptop story, that is going to be incredibly suppressed. Because if they're working with the Biden administration, they're not going to let material or content get by that is negative about Joe Biden. So some of these tweets that you may see that have like 1,000 views or 2,000 views and it's a clip or whatever, probably would have 15,000, 20,000, 25,000 views. And it's something I've noticed too on Twitter. It seems like some of the content that's not political at all, and sometimes it's just a little silly. Someone can post something about, oh, Rihanna has a new lipstick, and that'll get like 25,000 likes, and it's crazy. But if you post something that a lot of people probably should know, but they don't know, and it's political about the current administration, oftentimes, if this is what is happening and they're working with the Biden administration to suppress certain types of content, oftentimes that information is not going to reach many people. Or if it does reach more people, then that's when bot farms will come after you and they'll report you, they'll mass report you, and you'll be removed.
Lee Fang broke this story. He's an investigative journalist at The Intercept. He joins us tonight. Lee, thanks so much for coming on. This seems like a really important story, which is for some reason being ignored. Do we get the outlines right? The administration is working with the tech companies to censor people.
Yeah, that's right. You know, Tucker, we looked at really hundreds of documents that paint a vivid picture of the FBI, the DHS, closely collaborating with the top social media platforms, Twitter and Facebook, to censor various forms of content under the banner of fighting disinformation. And the story shows a couple of things. One, it shows what you just mentioned, a very cozy relationship between the government and these tech giants. There's those monthly meetings that you just mentioned, but also just very cozy emails and texts, not a very adversarial relationship. You know, we looked at one text where Microsoft executive texts Jen Easterly, the top disinfo director at DHS appointed by Biden, basically saying the government needs to get, the private sector needs to get more comfortable with the government. They're closely collaborating on reports talking about the expanded role for DHS in censoring a really broad collection of topic areas, of policy and political topics. And, you know, just broadly speaking, the story also just looks at the mission creep of DHS. This is an agency that was founded in the aftermath of 9/11 to combat foreign terror threats of Al-Qaeda and the like. But over the last 5 years, it's kind of evolved in its mission. It's moved towards fighting disinfo, and their justification is, you know, disinformation radicalizes the homeland. It can lead to disruptions in public health or in political violence. So they have a justification. We have these documents, and they're pushing forward with this broad censorship agenda.
Criticizing the people in charge is dangerous.
You see, he said continuing on with this broad censorship agenda. That's what's happening here. And the president, here's the thing. The president's administration should not be entangled with big tech. I find that to be a conflict of interest because, like I said, if it's negative information about you, they're going to bury it or they're going to suppress it. So I don't think that that's cool. I don't think that should be allowed at all. And this is going to go into another story, which we've talked about before, about net neutrality and about the promise that Joe Biden made to all of us that he was going to break up big tech. And that's not happening. But in no way, shape, or form should the president's administration be entangled with big tech to the point where they can decide what should and should not be censored.
I don't know why you did this story at the Intercept. I'm just so grateful that you did. It's a great story. It's a huge public service. I hope you're rewarded for it. I doubt you will be, but you should be. Lee Fang, thank you very much.
There's one part here I wanted to touch on as well. I'm sorry. I'm just going to go back 1 second. I don't know if he has been on anyone else's show. If he has, please let me know if you saw him on another show about this in the chat. But this was the only one that I saw.
Is working with the tech companies to censor people.
Yeah, that's right. You know, Tucker, we looked at really hundreds of documents that paint a vivid picture of the FBI, the DHS, closely collaborating with the top social media platforms, Twitter and Facebook, to...
Okay, so it's the FBI and its Department of Homeland Security collaborating with Facebook and with Twitter. So we already knew that the FBI was working with Facebook because Mark Zuckerberg kind of spilled the beans during that Joe Rogan interview. Now we know also Twitter, and also add DHS to that as well. And you know what I was just thinking about also in reference to Twitter, and everyone needs to be careful with this. Just because you send someone a DM on Twitter doesn't mean they can't see it. I'm going to say this again. Just because you send someone a private DM, direct message for people who don't know what that means, on Twitter, doesn't mean that FBI or DHS can't see what you guys are talking about. Keep that in mind. For those of you that go into these Twitter spaces on Twitter, you're being listened to. And I said this back then. Don't think that nobody is listening to those conversations. So just be careful what you're saying in those Twitter spaces. Be careful what you DM people, because all this is being watched. And I called this a while ago. I was like, they could be watching what you're doing and maybe you just don't know. Same thing for Facebook. Facebook messages, private messages that you send to people, don't assume that no one else can see that.
Censor various forms of content under the banner of fighting disinformation. And the story shows a couple of things. One, it shows what you just mentioned, a very cozy relationship between the government and these tech giants. There's those monthly meetings that you just mentioned, but also just very cozy emails and texts, not a very...
So they're even having meetings with them.
Adversarial relationship. You know, we looked at one text where Microsoft executive texts Jen Easterly, the top disinfo director at DHS appointed by Biden, basically saying the government needs to get, the private sector needs to get more comfortable with the government. They're closely collaborating on reports talking about the expanded role for DHS in censoring a really broad collection of topic areas of policy and political topics.
Of policy and political topics. You guys see what's happening here? They're getting prepared for 2024. Mark my words. They're working closely with the administration. They're already having meetings with them. So they're getting prepared for 2024. So let's all remember this come 2024, right? Just in case something weird happens electorally. And also, please protect this man. His name is Lee Fang. Please protect him.
And, you know, just broadly speaking, the story also just looks at the mission creep of DHS. This is an agency that was founded in the aftermath of 9/11 to combat foreign terror threats of Al-Qaeda and the like. But over the last 5 years, it's kind of evolved in its mission. It's moved towards fighting disinfo, and their justification is, you know, disinformation radicalizes the homeland. It can lead to disruptions in public health or in political violence. So they have a justification. We have these documents, and they're pushing forward with this broad censorship agenda.
So he said that their concern is that it could lead to disruption, basically violence, basically the people rising up, right? So this is what I'm trying to tell you. Like, even if you're trying to organize, like say you're trying to organize a protest or something about that, like that, I wouldn't do it on those platforms. Move over to Telegram. Seriously, move over to Telegram. There's another one too that I forget about. I'm not on all these things. But be careful. Instagram, same thing. Instagram is still Facebook. They're the same company. So just be very careful. And this is something I've always been, you know, worried about. Like, what are people saying? How are they saying it? And what could be used against you? Like, I don't know, man. I don't know. But just, I wouldn't put anything in a DM that you wouldn't want the alphabet letter agencies to see. Put it that way. Organic Jerk. Yes, Signal is another one. That's another app that you could use. But I wouldn't put it over there. I wouldn't. This is kind of scary, but I hope more people cover this. I know it's a Tucker Carlson story, but I hope more people cover it. I don't know if Lee went on to other shows, but hope so. Let's go ahead and put up that poll, Eric. So I wanted to do this after the discussion because I figured some people might change their mind after they heard the discussion. So the poll question is, do you agree with interest rate hikes to address inflation? 9% of you said yes. 75% of you said no. And 15% said not sure. Now that's 528 votes. Well, it didn't change as much as I thought it would, but it did change some than before I went live. So thanks so much. Thank you. Thank you. So that leads me to this piece here. Now, Ron Baclone was on last week talking about this. He's come on a couple of times to talk about net neutrality. Tell President Biden don't cave to big tech. Now, again, there's a petition here that you can sign. Eric, feel free to put the link in the chat for people. Sign the petition to tell Biden administration don't cave to big tech. Deliver on your promise to rein in abusive monopolies. Make it clear to Senate Democrats that antitrust bills S2992 and S2710 are a priority in the lame duck. And you can put your name, email, and zip code here. And then you just click where it says add your name. They still have not voted on those the net neutrality bill, but that is something that Chuck Schumer was trying to get done. It has not been done yet. So Ron has been really good about checking up on those and then updating me later on as well. Jilly Love, Sabby, this story, the lawsuit goes deep. Dr. Shiva, the intercept was just the tip of the story. Tell me more, Jilly. Tell me more. Blue Moon Red Wine, Twitter's such a crap site. I quit for a mental break, and now I can't recover my old account. Thank God. Oh, dear God, Lucy. I don't know about that. Thank you for the super chat, AJF. Another Intercept reporter, Klippenstein, something was on Democracy Now! About this spying topic. I'll check it out. Thank you for letting me know. Okay, I'll take that comment on Rockfin and we'll go on to Dr. Wolff. Thanks for the tip, Roger Meadows. I keep saying we need a network of public banks at municipal and state level to build surpluses and insulate economies from national downturns in the economy. Outlawing private equity from owning housing, hospital, medical. I thought I read this already. Yep, I read this one. Thank you for the tip, Roger Meadows. Republicans, remember DHS is your creation, which is now being used against you. Therefore, it is up to you to destroy it. Oh, Roger. Thank you for the reminder, Roger. Thank you for the reminder. Okay, here's some more things about Dr. Loon. Where did it go? Sorry, I just saw a comment about oh, here it is. Corey says Dr. Shiva, or not Dr. Loon, Dr. Shiva. Dr. Shiva is a loon, LOL. He's a perennial Republican candidate in Massachusetts who claims to have invented email. Oh, okay. Okay. I don't know about that one. That was funny. Okay. So Dr. Wolff had an interview here with Anna Kasparian. If you watch his economic update videos, so we do cover these, I think like once a week. We'll cover economic update once a week and we'll dive into it. Typically the first half of the show, he goes into an economic issue breakdown. And then the second half, he'll have a guest. So in this segment here, him and Anna Kasparian are discussing the Democratic Party. And the name of this video is called Economic Update, Anna Kasparian on Today's U.S. Crisis. And I will go ahead and forewarn you, if you decide to watch this full video, do not read the comment section. Let's go in.
Is the multiple award-winning host and producer of the online news show The Young Turks, whose astronomical rise has made it the world's largest online news show with over 6 billion views. Beyond broadcasting, Anna Kasparian is also a columnist for Raw Story and a journalism lecturer at California State University at Northridge. Her work has been published in the New York Times, Time Magazine, and many other publications. So first of all, Anna, thank you very, very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, I've watched you, I've seen you, I've heard you. I want your opinion on a number of topics that I know are in the minds of my audience, and they would love to get your take on these things. So let me begin with maybe the biggest overall one. For the last 30 years and counting, income and wealth in the United States has been redistributed through tax laws, through pricing mechanisms, through inflation, and a whole bunch of other mechanisms, from the bottom and the middle to those at the top. That's a long-running phenomenon. The last 3 years have put a cap on that process that made it worse. We've had a crash, second worst in American history in 2020. We had the pandemic. We've had an inflation, or rather the present tense, we are having an inflation, and we are also having rising interest rates as the method thought to deal with the inflation. This is a collection of economic blows to the working class, the vast majority of us that are employees. And my question is, given all of that, given the tradition that the Democratic Party was somehow the spokesperson, if you like, of the vast working majority, can the Democratic Party survive having been unable to protect the working class from what I just went through, let alone advance its situation?
Okay, so before Anna responds here, I was thinking about like what Professor Wolff said about we've had a number of economic blows in a row. And honestly, for me, economically, it's been a problem since 2008. So it's 2022. I mean, you're talking, it's been over a decade. And I still don't feel that things really got back on track completely, or at least the way it was before 2008. So it's been a long time. And I know a lot of times people want to reference the pandemic, and that's when, oh, things started to fall apart during the pandemic. No, I mean, for me, economically, I feel like it hasn't been the same since the housing crisis started. Now, there's been ups and downs, but I just feel like economically, I really haven't. It's been a struggle. Johanna said, "Me too, Sabby, since 2008." Yeah, it hasn't been back on track. I just say that because I don't want people to feel like this started with the pandemic. And some people are saying that, and I don't think it did start with the pandemic. I've been feeling like this economic strain since 2008. Now, it wasn't as crazy as it was during the housing crisis in 2008 as it was in like 2014, right? But it's never really been back on track.
Well, I believe the situation is so dire in the United States at the moment that my concern at this point goes beyond whether or not the Democratic Party can survive. The Democratic Party now being completely captured by corporate interests through campaign finance of elections, and also through the fact that they're literally investing in individual stocks on their own, meaning.
Okay. This is the piece here where I felt like she wasn't being truthful. Like the way that she explains it, she says the Democratic Party now being, corporate, she makes it seem like this is something that just happened. The Democratic Party, like they've been corporate for ever since corporate money got into politics. So it is the way that she explains it. She makes it seem like this all just started. It didn't just start. It has been worse. It's gotten worse over time. But the Democratic Party has been corporate as long as I've been alive, and even before I was alive.
They're very much in favor of this wealth redistribution from the bottom to the top. That leaves this huge void for workers in this country who are angry, who are living lives of economic instability, who are grappling with insane poverty in many cases, and want to understand what's happening in the country. And what makes the situation even worse is we have consolidation of our media, corporate capture of our media.
We need to go back to this point right here where she talks about insane poverty, because I don't know if Professor Wolff knows just how some of the comments that she's made.
Of elections, and also through the fact that they're literally investing in individual stocks on their own, meaning they're very much in favor of this wealth redistribution from the bottom to the top. That leaves this huge void for workers in this country who are angry, who are living lives of economic instability, who are grappling with insane poverty in many.
Why is she speaking for? See, this is something I've noticed, like when I used to, like before I had my show, when I used to watch left media, it's like they have commentators, they have people come on to talk about working class issues that are not a part of the working class, instead of just talking to working class people about what they're going through. Two, she talks about people living through poverty, but at the same time, she was demonizing homeless people on TYT, live on air. She, along with Jeffrey Katzenberg, and Jeffrey Katzenberg is the one who gave TYT that $20 million, for those of you wondering who that is. She, along with Jeffrey Katzenberg, they wanted them to criminalize the homeless. They wanted them to criminalize homeless people in Los Angeles. She did a whole spiel about it. She went off, and I think Jink was trying to get her to shush, but she just went off the rails about it. We covered it on this show about how she felt about homeless people. The truth came out. Her class came out. And you see, this is something I notice about with the left media. These are the people that they bring on to talk about working class issues. Anna Kasparian is worth millions of dollars. You guys know this, right?
Cases, and want to understand what's happening in the country. And what makes the situation even worse is we have consolidation of our media, corporate capture of our media. And rather than getting the full story, rather than helping the public to understand what's really transpiring in this country and why this inequality exists in the first place.
When she talks about corporate capture of the media, but the network that she is on takes sponsorships, corporate sponsorships, and took $20 million from Jeffrey Katzenberg. So just because they're on YouTube doesn't mean they're not captured by corporate. If you see what I mean? Well, if your investors are corporate, that still doesn't mean that you're not captured by corporations, especially when you have sponsorships. I'm sorry, but I'll never forget this. When we want to talk about working class and poor people, TYT, well, Cenk Uygur didn't even want his own employees to unionize. This is why this is laughable to me. I don't know, again, I don't know if Professor Wolff knows this information or not, but they didn't even want the employees to start a union. And these are the people that people want to talk to about working class and corporate capture. Okay.
What they do is they dive into endless culture war issues that further divide the country and essentially fuels some of the hatred that we're seeing among the electorate right now, toward one another. And so I'm genuinely concerned about this country devolving further into fascism. I think that we're seeing signs of that as we speak, with prominent public figures openly declaring war on Jewish individuals. And yes, I'm talking about Kanye West. And, 5 years ago, statements like this would have.
Notice again, and I talked about this earlier on RBN. Listen to this.
Understand what's really transpiring in this country and why this inequality exists in the first place. What they do is they dive into endless culture war issues that further divide the country and essentially fuels some of the hatred that we're seeing among the electorate right now toward one another. And so I'm genuinely concerned about this country devolving further into fascism. I think that we're seeing signs of that as we speak, with prominent public figures openly declaring war on Jewish individuals. And yes, I'm talking about Kanye West.
I got to say this. Look, I don't approve of what Kanye West did. We talked about this over on RBN the other day, but I have been noticing something, and I'm going to mention this too. It's really interesting that so many people are coming out in support for the Jewish community, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I also noticed, and I said this last night, where was Anna Kasparian and Cenk Uygur and all the other white prominent leftist commentators? Where was their coming out of support for Breonna Joy Gray when she was getting racist attacks and death threats on Twitter for the past 48 hours? Because they were silent. This is something I've noticed, when it happens to Black people, they don't want to say shit. But when it happens to people who are not Black, we're all supposed to feel that same type of compassion and empathy. But when it happens to us, they're silent. It's been a trend. I've been noticing it all week. Aye. And by the way, who do you know? She knows Breonna Joy Gray. Does she know Kanye West? No. Wow.
And, 5 years ago, statements like this would have seemed hyperbolic to me. But I do think that since there isn't really anything being done to make Americans whole, to ensure that we actually tackle inequality effectively, these narratives in media, these narratives that are being spouted by the right wing in this country will absolutely, fuel fascism in America and potentially across the world. I'm genuinely concerned about that.
Then why don't you use the platform and the money that you have to help make Americans whole? You have the resources to do those things that you just mentioned. She doesn't want to do it. You see, that's the problem. There are people out there trying to help people in the communities, those of us doing mutual aid and things like that. We don't really have the resources to do it. Anna Kasparian has the resources to do it, but she won't get out there and do it. So what does that tell you? To me, it sounds like someone who's comfortable.
All right. You mentioned the media, and I'd like, because you're in it, you know it really well. How do you account, or let me put it differently, is the media the reason why over and over again now we see polls showing the mass of the American people feeling one way, and the Republicans and Democrats voting in the Congress, with a few exceptions, but in general, voting the opposite? And no one seems to notice that this, occasionally maybe, but this is a pattern. What's going on?
Money is going on. It's money. This is why it happens. Listen, like the way that they vote, and Glenn Greenwald describes this very well. There's always going to be a rotating villain, because as long as you have a rotating villain legislatively, then nothing gets done for the American people. You get me? As long as you have someone to point to, whether it's Joe Lieberman, like Obama said, whether it's Mitch McConnell, whether it's Joe Manchin, oh, look, another Joe, whether it's Kirsten Sinema, whether it's the Senate parliamentarian, As long as you have a rotating villain to point to, regardless of which party is in power, then you'll never actually get anything done for the American people. And you can always blame the rotating villain for the reason why you chose not to do it. These are coordinated efforts. I don't believe this is random. Most of the time, they already know if they have the votes for a bill or not. That's how they were able to tell you that they don't have the votes for the Medicare for All legislation. That's why they won't bring that to the floor. They already know if they have it. So if they already know if they have it, then they already know who is going to be the rotating villain. You guys, you following me? You get me? So this is all a plan. Do you see what I mean? Because what they got to do is, this is like theater. They have to put on a show for the American people. So we think that they're actually trying to do something. But at the same time, that one person comes in at the end and stops the progress, stops the legislation from moving forward. And that helps their donors. That's how they do it. It's because of money. That's why it doesn't matter which party is in power in reference to helping the people. I mean, yeah, you know, the Republicans may say no to some of the social issues. The Democrats may say yes to some of the social issues. But what we have even seen, even when it comes to the Democrats and social issues, they still didn't have the spine to codify Roe v. Wade into law when they had the majority decades ago. They still couldn't do it. So it is all for Wall Street. It is all for the corporations. That is actually what they're there to do. They're there to please them. They're not there to please us. It's just, I don't know. I feel like we're in a fishbowl. And they're standing outside the fishbowl and they're looking at us just swimming around. Busy little swimmers. And we just keep looking up from them every now and then at the bowl and just hoping that they help. And they just keep looking down on us. That's why. Let's hear what Anna says.
Well, what I think is happening right now is the issues that matter most to the majority of Americans, and they typically end up being economic issues for good reason, are mostly ignored, or more importantly, there's, in my opinion, a concerted effort to distract away from those issues and the fact that you have really two parties in name only when it comes to these substantive bread and butter issues. In reality, we have two pro-corporatist parties, and the way that they differentiate themselves with the help of the media is through culture war narratives. And that distraction, of course, ends up fueling the hatred that members of the electorate have for one another. But again, rather than focusing on the similarities that working Americans have with one another, including support for unionized labor, including support for doing something about inequality, wealth inequality, their focus has been on, honestly, a lot of manufactured issues. So while I believe in the importance of, let's say, protecting underserved communities, the transgender community being one of them, I think that there's an intentional effort to make it seem as though something like transgender athletes in school sports is the most important issue. And that takes up so much of the bandwidth in our corporate media and also in the rhetoric that we see in Congress. But fact of the matter is, what's really impacting the most Americans in this country right now, and it's the way our economic system is set up, the fact that wages have remained stagnant since the 1970s.
Yeah, but Anna, you're late. You really late to the ship. Like, we've been saying this for come on. We were saying this when we tried to tell you that the squad were frauds and that they played all of us and they took money from working class people. And you were still saying that we should support them, even though we knew they weren't doing anything for us. And they had already shown us they weren't doing anything for us. And you were like, oh, don't call them frauds. We still need to be there for them. They're the best we got. And you were still kissing up to the progressives in Congress. And we were miles ahead of you. So it's only that she's able to say this now because she has the approval to do so. You see what I'm saying? See, now it's okay to be mad at the squad. Now it's okay for everybody to be pissed at the progressives. But back when they refused to force the vote, how dare you get mad at them? Back when they supported the Capitol Police funding bill, we were told, how dare you throw them away? Last time I checked, I didn't see any of them canvass for these candidates. Those of us at RBN did. And they were yelling at us. They were yelling at the people on the ground. It's like, really? We told you they were frauds when they wouldn't even support the marches for Medicare for all. Not even saying they had to come out. They wouldn't even tweet about it. How dare you mention that about them? The only reason she is saying this now is because now it is the general consensus that everybody is pissed at them. That's why. And you know what? She'll probably still tell you to vote for them in the end. I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to hold on to, like how I feel. I can just let it out. Because you know why? I don't have sponsors. I don't have a donor. I don't have anybody who gave me $20 million and said, hey, I'm going to support your network here. As long as you're careful about what you say, I don't have to worry about that.
When you take into account inflation, wages have actually gone down considerably since the 1970s. And we have this unelected body of individuals called the Federal Reserve making decisions quite openly, candidly, about crushing workers further by increasing interest rates to respond to inflation. And no one in the media, by the way, addresses the fact that part of the inflation that we're seeing in this country is fueled by the Federal Reserve just pumping out money and giving money to corporations with low interest rates, of course, or no interest rates in some cases, and also through a policy known as quantitative easing, which is incredibly destructive to our economy, especially when you consider what it's done to our housing market. So these are maybe complex issues, but they're issues that I would venture to say the public is intentionally not informed on. And instead, all of the focus has been on everything that makes us different, everything that we disagree on, again, the cultural issues, the religious issues, all of that. And that's further dividing the country without addressing what the majority of the electorate actually happens to agree on.
Well, I'm glad she's coming around to some of these things. But like I said, when people were saying this 2 years ago, she called us all kinds of names. She was calling people liars. She was smearing journalists. She was calling people degenerates. But now it's okay because she says it. Man.
Right. I was struck as I think you must have been too, listening to the Fed Chairman Powell using repeatedly the word pain, P-A-I-N, that the policies we have to now go through will cause pain. And each time he said it, he carefully avoided making it clear pain for whom and who would not feel the pain. I mean, it was extraordinary exercise in the make-believe that the media, whether they're conscious of it or not, are engaged in promoting. Okay, well, that leads me to another question, still about the media. How important are things like the Young Turks, what we do on this program, there is an alternative media that has been called forth in a way by everything you just said. Do you see hope there? Is that a sign you think is worthy of attention?
I used to see hope with TYT, but they sold out. They really did. I did used to see hope with TYT. I actually used to like TYT, but once they got that money, everything changed. everything change.
I do think independent media is critical in countering the narratives that individuals come across in corporate media. But I am also concerned about how incredibly difficult it is for independent media to grow, to remain sustainable, to remain untouched by corporate greed and corporate interests, because fact of the matter is we're all operating under a system in which we need to make a living to survive.
Is she going to mention that they were corrupted by that corporate greed and interest? That's what's interesting about this conversation.
Companies like TYT, for instance, needs to have a steady revenue flow in order to survive. And that's incredibly difficult to do under a capitalistic model where media, again, has to operate under profit. We used to have something called the Fairness Doctrine, which was a far better system for journalism, which ensured that audiences, regardless of what radio show or television show they're watching, would be exposed to different perspectives rather than an echo chamber. And so we don't have that anymore. Reagan did away with that in the 1980s. And after that, the emergence of figures like Rush Limbaugh occurred. And now everyone's kind of in their own corners listening to, information or broadcasts that just reinforce their preconceived notions. And that's a huge problem. I think
Not necessarily. And I want to make this point. I want to be very clear about this. I think there's a misconception that for whatever reason, some people think that conservatives are only watching conservative media. That's actually not true. Did you know that some conservatives watch TYT? Some conservatives watch me. They don't agree with me on everything. Hell, they don't agree with me most things, actually. But that myth, I think, needs to disappear. Just like this idea that only conservatives are watching Tucker Carlson. That's not true. Democrats also watch Tucker Carlson. So this idea that Anna brings up about these preconceived notions that people only watch people that express their preconceived notions, that is actually not true. I watch people I agree with and I watch people I disagree with. If I did not watch like the other media, how could you guys know? Like, think about it. If I didn't watch like MSNBC, CNN, or Fox News, how would I know what they're talking about? Like, come on, guys.
TYT, if I may be a little self-critical, could do a better job in communicating to individuals who don't already agree with us in an effort to persuade them. I think there's a lot of frustration in the country. I feel a lot of frustration. And sometimes the instinct is to be insulting to those on the other side. But
you could do a better job in reference to TYT. You could do a better job communicating to people who are to the left of you. Because that's where a lot of the fire comes in. I think they could do a lot of jobs. See, they don't like they expect to get criticized from people on the right, but they don't like being criticized from people who are further to the left of them either. Not based on what I have seen.
You got to remember, again, that the majority of Americans do, in fact, agree on the bread and butter issues. We just have to make sure that we make those issues front and center. And we have to make sure that we communicate with individuals who might disagree with us on maybe some cultural issues in a way to help them see what's really going on in a higher level, what members of Congress are really up to, why it is that they continuously distract us with non-issues and culture war narratives. Now, that's
because money. As long as we're distracted, like, you don't need to research that. I can tell you that as long as we are distracted by these culture war issues, what else will happen? If you're distracted by what's going on over here, you're not paying attention to what's happening right in front of you, right? So you're not paying attention to the fact that your congressman or your congresswoman is taking all this money from Blue Cross Blue Shield, and that's why they don't want you to have Medicare for all. You're not paying attention to the fact that if you're distracted by Jim Clyburn's fish fry that he does every year, which people rave about. By the way, it's just fish and I can make better fish for you. If you're distracted by that and only focused on that, you're not paying attention to the fact that the reason why most of the people in your district are having health issues and health problems and don't have health insurance is because your congressman takes some of he's, I think, the second largest supporter of Big Pharma. So he would never vote for you to have Medicare for all. His own district, which is one of the poorest districts in South Carolina. It's all about money. And I think Anna knows that. Like, she's been doing this longer than me. It's all about the money.
It's not to say that we don't have a problem with racism, discrimination, and all of that in this country. We absolutely do. But what partially fuels that is the economic frustration and anxiety people are facing. They want a scapegoat. And what you have is a Republican Party that continuously gives them scapegoats, and they happen to be the least powerful people in the country.
Some of it is people want a scapegoat for their economic conditions, and then some people are just raised that way. Some people are raised to hate a certain race.
Immigrants, Muslim individuals, members of the LGBTQ community. I think independent media needs to be super focused on getting that message out, and maybe that'll make a difference. But what gives me the most hope, and I'm sorry, I know I'm rambling a little bit, is what we're seeing at the workplace, what we're seeing with places like Amazon unionizing, this new momentum for worker, a workers' movement, if you will.
You guys didn't even want your own employees to unionize. How can you not address the elephant in the room? And this is not to say you can't be for the unions that are happening now, but I think they need to address the elephant in the room. You guys need to come on air and say, look, a couple years ago, our own employees wanted to unionize, and you know what? We were against it. You guys, Anna and Jink, you guys need to speak on that shit. Like, I'm sorry, but this is ridiculous. To just sit here and act like you're all for this workers' movement when you didn't want your own employees to unionize, that's ridiculous.
For organizing the workplace. That's really the only thing at the moment that's giving me some hope, because it's making me realize that despite the corporate media narratives, workers are privy to what's going on to some extent, and they want a seat at the table. They want power. And I hope that this continues to evolve to the point where we start seeing more worker cooperatives, for instance, because the only way we as ordinary Americans have any say in anything is if we band together, work together, and demand more. And we're starting to see a little more of that.
She's been listening to RBN. She's been listening to RBN. Some of those talking points that she gave came straight out of RBN's playbook. Straight out of it. Like I said, some of them, they'll watch us. They won't have us on because they don't want people to hear the message to come from us. But they'll copy us instead. Because they weren't saying that shit before. They were not saying that. I'll go ahead and take that message from Delthea, Eric. All right. Shout out to Delthea, who's been a Sabby member for 16 months. Sabby Sabs, Anna has black pets. I mean, black friends. She has her blue check of goodness. So she doesn't have to do good. Just believe herself as good. That's a good point. That is a good point. Anna Kasparian blocked me like a long time ago. Like, I don't She really did. I don't even know why. Like, I was like, what the hell did I do? But what else? I want to go to some of these comments here and then we will head out. I could never stand how much control George Jetson's boss had over him and his family. We have been prepped and fed off of for their treasonous plan of indefinite indentured servitude. You know, you make me want to watch the Jetsons now because I forgot Yeah, that show was something else. He was working all the time. Lou, why is Professor Wolff platforming Anna? I don't know. I do not know. Thank you for the super chat, Miss. Dr. Shiva, PhD, is the main character in the story he sued. He is running for Congress. Check him out on Redacted. It's really important. I'll check that out. Margaret, Sabby, why would Wolff even interview her? I do not know, dude. I don't know. Thank you for the super sticker, JM. Thank you for the super chat. Confessions of Economic Hitmen. Please read. Thank you for that, Jessica. You guys are giving us a lot of pretty cool literature to read tonight. Jared, the left/right paradigm is totally useless at this point. Agreed. Dana, before TYT got that Katzenberg cash, they were laser focused on getting money out of politics. I told you what I tell you. You don't hear them talking about that no more. Thank you for the super chat, MV. Please do an interview with Ayo Kimathi. All right, that's another person I should interview. Thank you so much for that. Shinibraskin, remember her fawning interview with Madeleine Albright? Oh, bro, don't remind me. Krona Ursa, Wolff should have had RBN or people like them instead of TYT. Yeah, we're not blue checks though. That's how some of this works sometimes. Only people who are blue checks. Thank you for the super chat, Roger. Your boy got everyone saying cooperatives now. Weedy Gonzalez, meet George Jetson. Jane, his wife. Is it daughter Judy next? Daughter Judy. No, it's his boy Elroy. Daughter Judy. Astro, his dog. I think I got it out of order. Oh, his boy Ellen. His boy Ellen. Jane, his wife. Okay, I'll take that comment on Rockfin, Eric. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin. Republicans, remember DHS is... Oh, I saw that already. I think I did read that one. Okay, sorry. My bad. Okay, guys, I am heading out. I hope you guys have a really nice weekend. Next week is the week, guys. What is going to happen in the midterms? I don't know. But like I told you, it is very tight races that we have right now. When I saw earlier today, Fetterman and Oz had just moved ahead of Fetterman. And I also saw with Warnock and Walker that they are tied. So that is that. Okay, I'll take the comment on Rockfin. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Dave. Anna is buttering up Richard Wolff with Wolff-friendly talking points. She is way late, Sabs. Pathetic, actually, here. Yeah, it's just very, I don't know. It's just weird, man. She's weird. Thank you so much for the super chat at Kid. Sabby, yes. So we must support a 2023 RBN speaking tour. Please. Agreed. Bet. Let's go. We have to do it. We have to get it done. I don't want to speak for everybody though, but we should get this done. Okay, I'm heading out, guys. Have a good weekend. I hope you have some fun time with your fam. Tomorrow's my anniversary, so I don't know what I'm doing, but I will find out at some point tomorrow. So, yeah. Thank you for the super chat, Dodging. Anna's dad works in commercial real estate. They're rich. Yeah, I've heard about that before. Yeah, it's just, I don't understand why people bring on rich people to talk about working class issues. It's just really weird. All right, I am getting out of here. Peace out. No call in tonight. I did call in last night and on Tuesday. So you know how we do this. Have a good night. Keep up.